Welcome back, everybody. It is Wins Above Fantasy, episode 140. Today is Thursday, May 23rd. As you're joining us on the podcast, we also got the live stream going tonight on Twitter. Thank you guys for joining us. I'm Van Burnett, joined as always by Mr. Steve Giswelli. Very excited to talk some pitchers with you guys tonight, and with a very special guest, one that the drum rolls kind of spoiled on the live stream, but one that we've been excited and teasing a little bit on the show. Steve pulled this one together, and we're very excited because he is a trusted source for pitching insider tips, some exclusive stuff, always bringing the heat. It is Mr. Lance Brozdowski. Lance, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the show, man. How's it going?
Hey, what's up? I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, guys. This is gonna be fun.
Yeah. And Lance is joining us now. We had to wait. This is the first time we've ever had to hold off until a MLB game finished. So are you in like the clubhouse at Wrigley or where are you at right now, Lance?
No, I'm in the studios right next to the stadium. So I work primarily like on our pre and post game shows and stuff. So as long as like the game ends and I got my stuff in, like I'm kind of free to just watch our post game and head out and stuff. So yeah, it's right next to the park, so it's cool. I can swing over there whenever I want and take a peek at some pictures and stuff, talk to guys and whatnot. So it's a pretty sweet gig. I'm super grateful for it.
That's awesome. And for anybody listening in that does not follow Lance, it's you got to do that ASAP on X at Lance Braz. Lance is player development analyst at the Marquee Sports Network for the Chicago Cubs. And also Lance, you do a ton of stuff, Lance. I'm sure Steve will wax poetic as well because you're always bringing some great insider tips. But I'll give you a chance to kind of plug where your work is, where people can find you and follow you, because I'm on the Substack as well, and it is great stuff. I know Steve is too.
Yeah. Substack and YouTube have really been my focus this season, so to speak. So that's been my focus. I feel like I came into the season, I had like so many ideas and thoughts, and I like really had to reduce it down. Just a couple things that I could focus on and get the quality up high enough to be happy with what I was producing. So those have been my two things. I mean, the Substack's like a nightly thing I do just to like make sure it's like my box score. Like most people pop open something and watch box scores or rip through box scores. I just do it in a little bit of a different way where it's like very focused on what a pitcher did and if they're changing anything. And then the YouTube is kind of like the more, I don't know if you want to use the word like esoteric, but it's like the broad, like, this is what I've been noticing, or like, I think this. Let me see if I can break it down in a way that's more visual, so to speak. So that's been my flow this year, and I feel like I'm kind of locked in. So we'll see how long it goes before I break down, but we'll see.
Dude, it really is. It's fascinating. It's awesome to watch how you bounce from kind of micro to macro, where like at the player level, it's so nuanced down to like how they're attacking lefties with 2 strikes. And then you zoom out to kind of team wide or league wide trends. So it's awesome, man. You're doing fantastic work. Steve, I know we got names. We only got a limited time with Lance, but I'll let you jump in here. Thank you, by the way, Steve, for setting this up with Lance. And how's it going? And I'll open the floor for you to fire some questions off.
Yeah, it's good. And it's funny that Lance hinted at that. Like my morning box score routine is reading Nick Pollock's pitcher roundup, reading, I still read Razzball's player roundup just from a fantasy perspective too. And I like Gray's writing. I think he's hilarious.
The
and
humor there is great. I read those.
Yeah. Yeah. And then 3 is waiting for my Substack email to come through with Lance's pitcher breakdown, because it's overwhelming. And I have chats with friends who play fantasy and are into analytics, and there's a lot of like, there's so much data that it could be overwhelming. And it's like, all right, how many more stats do we need? I know that tracking came out and it was like half the industry seemed like they were rolling their eyes at it. Half of them were very excited. And then, everyone was saying, well, we need more information. I think you do a great job of providing that advanced information, but also making it digestible and easy to understand, which is not always easy to do. And honestly, like without like coming off like you know more than someone else, or just like diving into a stat that not everyone that everyone understands. So you make it super digestible. It's a great morning read, and like it's like if there's something interesting that happened with the pitcher, like I know that you're going to be writing about it. Like it was Ranger Suarez this morning, like about how dominant he's been like it's not just okay, he's been great. It's like, okay, what is he doing to what adjustments has he made to have the success? And it's a great just way to enlighten yourself about it. So it's awesome. I highly recommend it. I don't miss one. It's for anyone that likes baseball, fantasy baseball. I cannot recommend enough to subscribe to that Substack. So, and thanks for joining. Yeah,
Lance, I'd be remiss not to fire a couple questions before we get into some analysis stuff, but would love to hear origin story, just how you got into analyzing pitchers. I know we've only got 30 minutes, but summary of the origin story. And then I do interviews in my day job for a living, and I always love asking people about moments. And like, if there was a moment that jumped out where it was kind of like, you found yourself pinching yourself that you're like, oh man, I'm in this clubhouse talking to this person. Like, was there a moment when you kind of took a step back and you're like, man, this is cool that this is what I'm doing? So origin story and moments. I want to hear it.
The origin story is weird. I was an accounting major undergrad. So I worked in public accounting for like 3 years, and it was the worst thing imaginable. If anyone does that, it's funny. Like, I'm not saying to those who work in accounting that's the worst thing ever. I'm honestly like, I admire someone who can hang in that profession. I just like, I don't know. Those hours were nuts. And I was like, if I'm going to be working 60, 70 hours a week, like I at least would prefer it to be on something I remotely care about, as opposed to like doing the books for like Ocean Spray cranberry juice, which was one of the companies I audited. So anyways, it's just like, it's one of those things where it's just, I don't know. That's what I did. And then I hard pivoted out and went to grad school, journalism grad school at Northwestern, which was definitely like the pinnacle. So yeah, that was great. It was helping me kind of hard pivot out. And then I really stumbled in this marquee job through like a friend of a friend. They needed someone who knew baseball and could video edit. And I learned video editing and stuff basically on YouTube for the most part, which is funny. Shout out to YouTube University. I've grown from there. Like the pitching stuff, I've always been a huge baseball fan. Like I grew up in Connecticut around the minor leagues. And everyone has varying interests as I think they grow and stuff. And I was super interested in prospects for a while and did some stuff with Jeff Ponce, who's now with Baseball America. I'd actually worked for Raswell for a period of time. Like, you flow around, you like kind of find what you want to get into and stuff. And I've just landed on the pitching stuff because I find it fascinating. And I really enjoy I think the main thing is like talking to coaches has been my main thing. And a lot of that stuff doesn't really come out publicly because a lot of the conversations are off the record, but it really helps like inform perspective a lot. The moment for me was, I have two. One is funny. One is I was a Cardinals fan growing up, which is unfortunately no longer the case because I work for the Cubs TV network. So I don't really care about the Cardinals. But
Van's a big Cardinals fan.
You're not allowed to. That could change.
Oh, there we go.
Change down the road. It's okay.
It's you just lose it. It's one of those things. Like I just lost the fandom as I got like being around the sport. But I remember when I worked for the Associated Press as like a stringer for a period of time. One of the first clubhouses I was in at Wrigley Field was the Cardinals clubhouse, and I walked in. I think Albert Pujols was still on the team. I'm blanking on this. I know Wainwright was there. It was Wayne Oyati and like all these other guys that I like remember. And I was like, wow, this is like a childhood moment for me. And then I like had my phone out and I wasn't like recording anything. I just like had the phone out because that was my recording device. This was probably 2017 or 18. And the PR director, I don't remember who it was. He's not there anymore, but he came up to me and he like literally was like, you need to put your bleeping phone away right now. There are no phones allowed in this clubhouse. And I was like, holy crap, man. It's like, I'm a stringer. Like I need to record this to transcribe. And he's like, you can't do it with your phone. And I was like, what else am I supposed to do with? I wasn't this sassy. I was obviously like very red and terrified of it. But anyways, I think that was the exact moment I lost my Cardinals fandom, honestly. Like it was in that moment. I was like, no, like you can't do this to me. I grew up, I slaved over this team. I like cried as a kid. Come on, man. Yeah. And then the other moment is heroes. It's Don't Meet Your Heroes. And the other moment is 2 years ago I got a chance to do sideline. So be like a sideline reporter, like classic. Yeah. But I did it with an analytics slant, and I've done it occasionally. It hasn't become a regular thing, but stepping up onto Wrigley Field, like 2 seconds before first pitch in a 1:20 Friday start was like wild. Yeah. Like I think I still have the picture from that. I just thought it was is one of those things where I was just like, what is going on? And I was terrible in it. I'll tell you that. Like I did it a little in spring training too. It's very, very hard. So I've been trying to get better at that because I really think that's like probably the 99th percentile outcome for me is to like try to be an analytics sideline reporter. But someday we're working towards it. But that's definitely the good oh boy moment. And then the bad oh boy moment is the Cardinals being angry at me for no reason. So that's what I got.
Kills me. Oh, that's so good, man. Steve, did you want to chime in there? Do we?
I mean, I just remember going to Wrigley Field as a fan for the first time and being like in awe when you walk into that stadium.
Oh, yeah.
So I can't imagine doing that for the first time as a sideline reporter. Trying to balance delivering complicated.
There was no balance. There was no
quick
balance.
hit, right? Yeah.
It was. I talk very fast. I slowed myself down, but and people still say I talk fast, and it's like I don't know, man. I can't go any slower than this.
I mean, I've seen a few of the hits that you've posted on Twitter and stuff for the Cubs too. So and they've been great. So
thanks.
It's definitely an improvement from your first time for sure. I mean, I remember listening back, and it's cringe listening back to our first podcast here, and this is much lower stakes than being on on the Cubs sideline.
It means you're growing though. It's good. Yeah, if I look back and I see the same thing, I'm concerned.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's nice on a podcast. You have tunnel vision until you like look at the metrics, and if you pictured those people in a stadium, you'd be a lot more nervous than when I'm just like in the basement, you know.
Yeah.
But guys, it's an absolute treat. And again, you need to be following Lance at Lance Broz. But let's jump in, guys, because I know we wanted to talk about the YouTube, but that's something as well that you guys can go check out. It's a great piece talking about the Dodgers and kind of one of those macro level trends. Dodgers allergic to throwing high fastballs. So I think you even cite in there that Nick Pollock, who's our fearless leader here at Pitcher List, talks about high lock, high fastballs, low breaking stuff with the Blake Snell blueprint. And the Dodgers, for all their, touted to be great, smart organization as it relates to developing pitchers, everything of the sort, they are not really throwing high fastballs. They're throwing outside stuff. And you kind of break that down, Lance. I know we don't have time to cover the whole thing, but want you to, I guess, just kind of summarize what you found there, and also kind of your approach to something like that. So we can start with the macro, and then I promise for the listeners, we got 4 player names that we'll kind of rifle through as well and talk about some breakdowns. But would love to hear you talk about this YouTube piece to kind of showcase your type of work there.
Yeah, I mean, it was honestly a counter to hearing Pollock talk about high lock a ton, because I really think and I've been meaning to come on the craft with him too. That's been something that I think we're going to eventually do. We just haven't gotten around to it, but that would be super fun. But yeah, I mean, high lock, I get, it just makes a lot of sense. I even have support in the video for it from a slug and whiff and everything standpoint. I've seen it in certain orgs, like the Guardians of the other team that do, which I don't really mention in the video, but they also don't throw a ton of 4s up. So with the Dodgers, it's so glaring to me because they're such a sharp org that I just refuse to believe that they're doing it without intent. So I just try to come up with a couple of reasons as to why after talking to some people about it. I think there's a reason to believe that it, from a tunneling perspective, which is a word that I still think we play around with the meaning of in the public space. I have a very specific definition of it. I purely think it's just location based. I don't really think there's as much pitch interaction going on, but in a way, I think there is pitch interaction because of the location, if that makes sense. I think the root of tunneling is location rather than it tunnels really well because it doesn't have a lot of movement off the fastball. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It's like a weird concept. I've tried to do some videos on it. I'll probably do another one on it, but I just think with the fastball away, potentially it helps a lot of their sliders, which are usually not big. They're trying to get to those sliders most of the time. The one that I've actually gotten the most feedback on that it seems like people believe the most is actually just a pure count leverage one. If you just think about the natural miss of the fastball for most guys, it's usually up into the arm side. So if you're putting a target up top, you're missing above the zone, your probability of strike is probably below 1%, called strike, or foul ball, really. And for away, if you think about that same miss, you have a stronger chance of clipping the top of the zone or clipping top left quadrant away from a righty. And although that does expose you to more risk middle of the plate, I just think the idea of winning 0-0-1-1 is definitely something teams think about. And I mean, Foolish Baseball did a video on this, count leverage is everything. I do think, at the end of the day, it's really hard to have an overarching philosophy that isn't like you have to get into 1-2 counts and you have to get into 0-1 counts. So that's kind of the idea behind it. You know, I get Nick's point. I do think it makes a lot of sense. I've gotten on this kick recently of variation of location on individual pitches, though. I noticed this with Ranger Suarez in my Substack post too, where he throws his sinker away to righties early and then inside late. I think it's such an old school idea. It's funny that I've come around to this, but I do really think I want to know whether there's research on this. I'm not a huge like nerd research guy, so I tend to defer a lot of that. I'm more like an interpret and communicate guy. So I'm curious if anyone's done like research on pitches having multiple locations, whether it be count based or just the guy likes to throw it in 2 spots, and whether that helps in any way. Like Assad does it with his cutter; he throws that in and out. There's a lot of guys who like can split plates with 1 pitch. I've always wondered whether you just count that as 2 pitches, you know. So it's just one of those things where like I think it just makes a pitcher better, in my opinion, if you're able to dot away and up. You know, like these guys, the Dodgers still go up a lot of the time for their forcing swing miss. It's just early count. I don't think they want swing miss. I don't think they care whether it's a swing and miss at the top of the zone. So they just don't throw it there. And they do have some guys that throw it there, right? Like Emmett Sheehan and Landon Knack have the kind of fastball that works there. But in other respects,
you're saying because that's because they're a little bit more like flat, right? With their
flat,
shape as well. Yeah. And no,
I just
that's
think the average guys, they're like, don't do that. Just give me a strike, and then we'll figure it out late. So
what's cool? You'd say like interpret and communicate, but I think it's also cool that it's like challenging assumptions, and you know, even the bat tracking data that just came out, and we were talking last week about Alex Chamberlain's tweets of like, you know, bat tracking for batters is tired, bat tracking for pitchers is wired. Like looking forward to what's next for the kind of this frontier of data visualization and access. But I think it's a cool point you brought up that like if you go to 1 pitch in multiple ways, that could almost be classified as 2 pitches. And it seems like down the road that'll be an easier thing to track and monitor of, you know, who uses 1 pitch in a way that it's a weapon in different ways. But yeah, it's super fascinating. And again, you guys should go out, check that YouTube link, because it's an awesome way to, I think, as you've mentioned in the past, Lance, kind of zoom out and look at big trends as opposed to just the players. But Steve, you brought a short list of players, and we got kind of inspired by the Substack. We got an ace, a riser, an underperformer, and then a prospect. So we'll try to move through these quickly. But Steve, why don't you start us out with Tarek Skubal, who is obviously having a great breakout year despite tonight. He had a little bit of a rough outing against the Royals, but give me your kind of slug on Skubal, and then kick it over to Lance to hear his take on him as well.
Yeah, I think Skubal's a fascinating take. And of course, I put together this rundown earlier this week, and he had probably his worst start like since he came back from last season, since he's been amazing. And I just think that he's such an interesting case study, in the first one that I wanted to look at, because yeah, Skubal was a pretty big prospect, and he kind of took like this linear route to being an ace that we don't really see. Like it was just a slowly but surely steady progression. Yes, there was a big injury in there from 22 to 23, but he just steadily improved his K percentage every year up until including this year. Decreased his walk percentage, decreased his ERA, all of his ERA indicators you know, slowly went down over the last few years until he became arguably one of the best pitchers in the game. So it's like, you don't really see, like, you know, Corbin Burns was kind of a guy that, okay, he unlocked the cutter and then became an ace and it all clicked.
Exploded.
Skubal, it's not really as clear as that to me. So I really wanted to get Lance's thoughts on like how this progression has happened, and then maybe what we could look for to see like who's the next. Like, you know, it's hard to.
I wish I had a next.
You can frame everyone who's the next X, but I guess what made Skubal click and become this amazing starter.
Yeah, super broad. I think it has to do with his arm angle and slot and lowering it over time. I think at least he's lowered it over time. Just remembering, I actually had a conversation with Robin Lund, their assistant pitching coach, at like a conference this offseason. He was a really cool guy. He comes from Iowa, which has produced like a lot of pitching coaches and strategists and stuff.
Cool.
Yeah, Scuba. I mean, he's just a really good pitcher. Like I think the reinvention, so to speak, of that changeup was huge for him over time. Like actually getting that pitch to somewhat match slot of fastball, throw it a ton in 2-strike counts and neutralize righties. The thing for me that is interesting this year, and I'd say to some extent, like if I had to describe my Substack, it's more just like me pointing out interesting things. And I know sometimes people are like, I need more actionable fantasy advice, which I totally understand because I'm a fantasy on a fantasy podcast right now. But a lot of the times, like, I don't know. You know what I mean? I just find things interesting. I want to point them out, and like I'll think about them. And sometimes if I have a take, I'll put it in there. But with Scooball, he has really backed off his slider as like a strikeout pitch, excuse me. So I just confirmed the usage here. I want to see if it was actually down, but he threw that thing like almost 20% of the time in 2-strike counts last year. And this year to righties, it's down to like 5-6%, which is interesting to me. And he's also like jacked up the sinker. So this is one of those situations where it's working, you know, and it doesn't really seem like there's any reason to push against him. But I would love to talk to him and ask why he made these changes, because they're not super apparent to me. But I also I absolutely love when like a pitcher is really good and then just is still really good in a different way. And that's what I think we're running into with Scooble, where like I know, Saris mentions this with like Luis Castillo, where it's like, oh, it's 4-seam sink, slider, and change. He's got plus command on everything. He can kind of just like do whatever he wants, even to either hand. And so he'll go right change ups if he wants, and he'll go slider to lefties if he wants. Like he can flip those pitches around in a way that really works because his command of them so good. And like I wonder whether we're opening up a can of worms with Scooble, where like down the road it's just, oh, he can go 4-seam or sink or slider or change, and he can just do it to either hand, like to righties in any way he wants based on matchup and stuff. And that could really push him deep into like the postseason and be challenging pitcher. So yeah, I'm a little not like concerned, but perplexed as to why some of these changes were made. Like he's really leaning on a sinker this year, and it's working. You know what I mean? It's just that's not as big of a swing miss pitch for him.
It's usually the opposite
last year,
it's
and now
usually
it's
the
better,
opposite,
right? It's like
it's usually the opposite, right? Like you unlock strikeouts with some sort of breaking pitch, usually a slider nowadays, right? So it's interesting how, and there hasn't been like a drop in overall K rate too. It's still like,
I mean, no, the slider's gotten better. He's throwing it like early count, and he's throwing it up in the zone now, and it's swing miss is higher than it was last year. He's tinkering, man. I love it.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you said that any organization wants to get ahead in the counts. One thing, just scanning the numbers, his first pitch strike rate is up 10% this year, so it's something he's doing really well. Mainly from that slider, and the changeup is still great, as you mentioned. But that is Scooble. We've got a riser as well that we want Lance to weigh in on, but we got to take our first ad break. We'll be right back after this. All right, so switching over to Garrett Crochet, who's our riser. Steve, again, I'll give you first crack here because you threw him on the rundown. I know he's obviously having a breakout season. Had another good start just recently, and now we're looking at a guy who's pretty much an SP1 to date this season, which is crazy to say because he came out of nowhere. But Steve, why don't you intro and then hear what Lance says for Garrett Crochet, who, obviously with the White Sox, it'd be interested if he got moved, but I think you got to hold on to a guy like that.
Yeah, I just have no idea where this sort of came from. Like, I know he's a big prospect coming up, and it just seemed like he was destined for the bullpen just based on the innings counts, right? Like, I think he had less than 70 innings total from like 2020 to 2023. It's just absolutely crazy. It was closer to like 80, but still. And I know there was some hype around him in the preseason, and there were some interesting things. It's like, oh, Garrett Crochet is going to start now. Like, how is that going to go? And I think it's gone better than absolutely anyone's could have imagined. And it seems like it's all based off of that cutter, but I think his fastball's gotten better. His changeup's gotten good in recent starts. The stuff plus numbers on the cutter don't jump out, but that seems like the key. So I guess I know you wrote a lot about Garrett Crochet early in the season, especially. And then there was even a dip where I think he was dropped in a lot of fantasy leagues too a few weeks ago. And now people are regretting that after the last 5 starts. So I know you wrote about him a lot, Lance. Curious to find out what you took away from the look into him.
Yeah, no, I was stunned at that drop. Everyone dropping it. That made no sense
Yeah.
to me. It's like we have stuff plus and these other things for a reason. Like this dude had plus stuff and was kind of commanding it. And it's like, well, why are we backing off him? You know what I mean? Like it made no sense to me whatsoever. I've been a huge fan of him. Like I don't know where it came from either. And the main thing that I don't know where it came from is the fact that he's holding velo for like deep into games. Like they actually come to Chicago, I think next week, and I'm definitely going to try to grab him in chat and be like, what did you do in the offseason? Because like if you're a reliever and you're throwing 97 and you could just hold that for 6 innings, like just do it. Like you're like 5 times more valuable as a starting pitcher than a reliever. This makes me think like Mason Miller. Like I don't know. Like I want Mason Miller to be a starter. Like I understand he's the best reliever in baseball, but like I wish that dude was a starter through and through. It'd be so much more productive, I think, for the organization from an upside standpoint. Unless they're just trying to ship him out. But anyways, Crochet, yeah, the cutter's cool. He's also increased the usage on the cutter. That's becoming like his main pitch now. He's not really throwing that sweeper anymore. The sweeper's nasty. I just wonder whether they don't entirely love it versus opposite-handedness and dropping the usage. You know, it's kind of more like a flash show me pitch. But yeah, he's filthy, man. Like everything here is good. Like it's you could argue the fastball shape isn't like incredible, but it's hard enough where it buys down the shape cost, so to speak, of needing to be really good carry. The cutter's like added drop as he's progressed throughout the year too, and he's stayed at velo. So like the grade of that, I think on a rolling basis from a stuff plus perspective is probably ticked up. It's also just like eating righties alive. Like what he's got, like a 42% swing miss on it. I'd say it's like a borderline slider. They're classifying it as a cutter because it's hard. This gets into like all the distinction between like what do you want to call an individual pitch shape. But yeah, I mean, he's throwing more changeup too. Like I wouldn't have guessed that like beginning of the season, I did a little breakdown on him where I was like, yeah, this is pretty much for real. Like I love him. And at the time he threw like no changeup. They were all terrible. So if you told me in like a month that he'd get the feel for the changeup to the point now where he's throwing it more than his slider in May to righties, like that's like that's like a holy crap to the league. Watch out, Like I thought the changeup was fine, but he had no feel for it. It's still out of his zone a ton, but I love this guy. Like I think he's a frontline guy. I don't do pitcher ranks specifically, so I don't know where I'd have him. I wish I had more exposure in some of my fantasy leagues with him. Unfortunately, I just don't. I actually ended up going for Jared Jones in a bunch of leagues late as like a bench stash, and that's worked out. So I don't feel too bad that I didn't add Crochet as a stash, but yeah, he looks great. Like I see zero room for concern here at all. I think he's
it's just the innings at this point, right? I mean, he's already
exactly.
He's already at the high
innings and like
he's thrown.
What's the precedent of this dude throwing 97 through 7 innings for 150? Like I've no clue where it came from. Maybe it's just always been in the tank and like no one let him do it. The fact that he kind of can command the ball at this velo and hold it is like crazy to me. Like this is the problem with projecting prospects. It's like you could show me the guy, like you'd be like, this guy isn't throwing. He's a reliever right now, but actually, if you stretch him out to 6, he'll zone the ball at the same rate and actually better than he was as a reliever. You talked about it's like
you talked about you talked about that with Jones when you did like your Jones break. It's like I was high on this guy, but you also don't know that he's going to come in and have now this amazing command that he never really showed before. And
like the fastball was just better. And it's like, okay, well, if you told me, like if you take any prospect and give him 2 inches of vertical from the same release, like he's just going to be a better prospect. Very rare, especially if you're holding arm slide release consistent. Like, that's the problem with prospect projection. It's impossible. You're just going to miss all these guys.
But it's also what makes this game great and the analysis of it great. So
it is. It really is. Yeah. I mean, the extension too for both of those names, Jared Jones, Garrett Crochet, is close to 7 feet, which to me is seems like a subtle trend that like I might be chasing more extension specialists too, especially if the velo's up there. So Lance, I know our time is short with you. I think Steve,
keep it going a little longer here if you want. Let's do it. Let's rip.
No, I love it, man. I was just going to say, Steve, if you're cool busting out of the rundown, maybe we just do some quick hit Q&As with Lance before we release, or do we want to stick with some
if you got time for one more guy, Lance, let us know. If not, we could hit this.
Yeah, I got another 10 here, so let's go another 10.
Cool.
So you guys allot the time as you feel necessary.
Cool. Love it, man. Okay, well, this one I can set up because last year I was all over this undervalue of Kevin Gossman. This year I moved away as the stock went up, but I did not predict this coming. At 42 innings, 4.89 ERA, an xERA of 5.38. The strikeouts have by his standards evaporated. It's a 22.6% K rate and it's just kind of a head scratcher. The four-seamer actually has a higher CSW this year than it did last year. So with Gossman, you quickly move to the splitter, right? And it's like even looking at the splitter, like that seems to be the culprit where the whiffs are down a little bit, but the results on the baseball card just don't seem it's again perplexing as to like what do we point to with Gossman suddenly looking like an ordinary pitcher when we were signing up for this guy to be an ace, and for years and years we've accepted that he's going to have one of the best 15K rates in the game as well. So Lance, would love to hear your take on Gossman when you're kind of looking under the hood here.
Yeah, I wish I had a better like delivery. I feel like the other two guys I had like things that I was like interested in and poked on. He's just giving up more damage. Like I haven't really noticed a dramatic change in shape. There's not a drastic usage shift. He's never really like his fastball grades well-ish, right? I think off the top of my head, based on looking at the shape, like 94, 5.8 release, good extension. Like he's up to almost 18 vert. Like that's probably like a near plus fastball. It's just getting pounded. And that's always, I think, to some extent, maybe been his issue. I'd have to jump back to a couple years to kind of see.
He's always had fastball issue, but the splitter's been so good that I think the two played off of each other and definitely made the fastball play up.
Yeah, we've seen that with a lot of different guys. Like, you know, one pitch is so good that it forces the other pitch to be better. You know, like I think this is happening with Shota and his splitter. Like, I don't know if his splitter is actually great. I just think the fastball's so good that like it doesn't matter what else is thrown. You just have to like gear up. Like this whole argument, like Spencer Strider's slider is actually not that good of a pitch. Hot take, but it's so good. It works so well because of the fastball. You know, so I think that you run into situations like that where you just get one pitch that's so dominant. But his fastball's getting crushed by lefties this year. You know, like he's trying to go away with it. It looks, I mean, like I think that's always been his location. Like he's just getting pounded in the zone. Like I don't, there's not something here for me to be like, oh yeah, that, you know, like I just think he has to change something. Like what, do you guys have anything here that's better than me?
The two biggest concerns for me are, it's one concern, but on two different pitches, it's the put away percentage. So the amount of getting called strikes strikeouts when you have two strikes. On the fastball, it went from 25% down to 17%. On the splitter, it went down from 24% down to 16%. So he's lost 8 and 7 percentage points on put away percentage for those two pitches. That's his bread and butter for strikeouts, right? Like you would either see that high fastball that people would swing and miss on with Gossman, or the splitter deep down that they would swing over, and those whiffs aren't happening anymore, which is, when you look at the swing strike rate, it's down. That's the chart I have up here on the stream, but it doesn't look too bad, at least on an individual basis. But then when you look at, so he's getting whiffs in other counts, but he's just not being able to put guys away with two strikes. It's just very, very strange for me. I thought that he was going to be like, you know, I know he had that injury in spring training. I thought he was going to be like a great discount in fantasy drafts, like kind of like Wheeler was a year or two ago when he had that concern and fell in drafts. Like I was like, you know, I'm normally not in on Gossman in the second or third round price, but he was falling like the fourth or fifth. It's like, all right, you know, if he misses a start or two, that's fine. And he even came back. I don't even know if he missed a start. They just put him in the fifth spot in the rotation when they need the fifth starter. And it's really, I mean, there's been some signs he was all right his last start, but it's still kind of concerning, I guess. And I don't really know if we have a great answer for what to do with Gossman here.
This could also be one of those situations where he's just IL'd in like 2 weeks, and he's like, I've just been dealing with this the whole year, and didn't tell you guys. And like that stuff I hate, because like it's hard for me to be like, his fastball's getting crushed in the zone, and like I don't know, does he throw more sinker to righties? Like that pitch just seems like it's been okay, and he's got a pretty good command of it. Like maybe he just rip sinker split to righties. Like I struggle a little with what to do here. I honestly I hate hoping for injuries, but that would help explain a bit. If he's just like, yep, just been dealing with this, I'm gonna shelve it for 2 weeks and then come back. You know,
if he has some, like, I mean, he did have the injury in spring. Yeah,
exactly. Like, is that lingering? Right? Like, I don't know per se, but
velo's down just a little bit as well, which sometimes can be like a tip off there. But it is tough to make sense of. Well, that's Gossman. We don't need to linger there. I think just from jumping off rundown, my question, Lance. You know, you're watching pitchers night in, night out, and I feel like with the amount of breakdowns you have, you probably are familiar with like the industry darlings, right? You know, Jared Jones was one of them late in the preseason, but still kind of came out of nowhere. This season, is there any pitcher that comes to mind that you're particularly high on that maybe you know, the numbers haven't kind of come out yet to where like I guess it's a sleeper for you in plain sight right now that you're kind of like, I like what he's doing even if the results aren't following? Not to throw you on the spot, but I'm just curious if there's any guys that come to mind that you think there's potential here despite what their surface numbers are.
I still like Hunter Brown, which may be masochistic of me, because that dude has had a terrible season. But I still think like the raw material there is good. I really like what I saw from Tyler Megill. That was an interesting kind of. I do the pitcher note stuff, and like sometimes I just don't get to certain guys, so I'll check it out when I get back to him for a second start. He started, and I just didn't look at him that day, and then he went on the IL, and we haven't seen him since. So this is like my first time looking at him. I knew he had the split, but I like some of those changes. Like the cutter there was really good. So if he's available in a league on the fantasy side, I would definitely try to get him. I'm not sure about 12 team. It depends on like the depth of your bench, but 15 team for sure. I think I got him in 15 teamers. I paid like 20 to 30 in fab in this most recent cycle for the 2-start, which is, and we'll see how that goes. But I really like what I saw. So I like him. Yeah, I don't off the top of my head have one that I'm like, this is my guy. Like I know like some of the analysts have certain guys that they've like latched onto.
No,
like,
Hunter Brown. Hunter Brown's a great one because that's a 7.06 ERA right now. And didn't he do something? I thought he did something unique.
Bunch of stuff.
Recently.
Yeah, I got a video coming out on that next week.
Oh, nice.
Kind of talking about like tinkering in season and whether it's cool for guys to make drastic changes in seasons. I've heard some varying thoughts on it from different staffs and stuff I've talked to. Yeah, he moved on the rubber, started throwing a sinker, eliminated his cutter to righties, started throwing a slider to lefties. Like that feels like one of those moments where it's like, I need to do everything different, not just one thing different, but everything different.
Like,
and like, I don't know if it's worked. Like he's been okay, but I like those in-season adjustments. I think teams should be honestly a little more aggressive with them. I just think orgs are so risk averse sometimes that you'll take the guy who's like a 4.5 ERA and underperforming, and you're just like, yeah, he's fine. But like the guy, I almost like enjoy looking at the guys who have like 6+ ERAs in prior years. I did this with Brady Singer in the offseason, and I was like, oh, he'll be better. Like there's no chance he puts up a 6+. Like the Royals, I thought were kind of on the swing up in terms of having some sharp people there. And like he's been good this year. And like I kind of don't know how. Like he's thrown a little more four seam, but it was one of those like weird bets.
You were all
Bubic was a great one. That he completely reinvented himself. But yeah, no, I'm curious to see who's going to be the guy with like a 7 ERA this year.
I mean, that's a fun task to do, and it leads to some good guys. Like I remember, like Lucas Giolito was like the league worst ERA. Corbin Burns too. Like, you know, I joked around. It's like, hey, you can kind of just draft the guy with the worst ERA who's qualified, and you're probably going to do pretty good.
And those drafting holds, man, you get late enough. It's like I would take those guys over the prospect. Like at least it was pitching. I have Brady Singer in a bunch of drafting holds. Not that I'm good at drafting holds. I'm actually terrible at them.
I mean,
trying to get better, but like I have Brady Singer everywhere because I was like, it was like 47th round, and it's like, do I want the prospect who has a 2% chance of debuting, and I don't know if he's good, or like Brady Singer who could be a 6 ERA pitcher, but at least he'll get some usable starts, and like, I feel great about the Brady Singer pick, you know?
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Steve,
one last one. Who is your when a guy's on pitching, whether you write about him or not, who is your favorite pitcher to watch right now in the MLB season this year?
It's George Kirby right now. Because he's been up and down, I think to some extent. I've been trying to like watch what he's doing, but I do enjoy watching the pure command guys a little more, honestly. Not pure command, but like he's velo mixed with command, so he's kind of like cheat code in that respect. But I like seeing what he's doing from a sequencing and location perspective, AB to AB. I will admit I've watched some Cole Reagan starts this year, and he's been really fun. I do struggle sometimes enjoying lefties because of the camera angle, though. It's just sometimes tough to like actually appreciate movement, especially when you like sit behind home and watch guys. Like I got a chance to do that a lot in spring training and watch like Steele and JP Sears and all these other lefties, Shota at Insulin Park and Wrigley, or the Wrigley of Arizona, I guess. I don't know. I don't know if they call it that, but like those, like you appreciate lefties differently when you see them from behind home.
Yeah.
Whereas like broadcast cameras generally don't do it justice. Like you don't really know the ball's moving. You kind of see velo differences. The guys look silly, but like it's super fun to watch lefties. So I think I lean towards watching more righties just because like see ball movement and see like what they're doing and where their misses are a little better. So Kirby's my guy right now, but it's a weird one because it's like he's been super swingy up and down. So he added the cutter, playing around more sinker there.
Yeah,
so it's like I want.
He's also a guy that seems like he could add a pitch like whenever he wants. Like he threw a knuckleball that was like amazing out of nowhere last year. So he seems like a perfect kind of guy for the lens that you're looking through. So that I appreciate it, but it shouldn't be surprising. He is awesome to watch and one of the masters of like tinkering and adding stuff and adding wrinkles. So yeah, I definitely appreciate that for sure.
Awesome. Well, Lance, thank you so much again for coming on. We'll release you. Steve and I will hang on for the last like 20 here, but you guys again follow on Twitter at Lance Bros and the YouTube channel as well. And then the Substack, do not miss it. This is where these daily pitcher deep dives, honestly, with some of the stuff Lance has talked about. lancebros.substack.com. But Lance, thanks again so much. This was a blast, man.
Thanks for having me, guys. Take care.
Thanks, Lance. Appreciate it.
Steve, you're on fire with the guests, man. This is great. We're gonna have to break it down, and we still got some names, and we'll kind of open it up and go loose. But we got to take our second ad break. We'll be right back after this. Steve, your reactions to hanging with Lance there. That was a lot of fun, man.
No, man, it was awesome. Yeah, really appreciate Lance taking the time and coming on. I know he's jam packed. Busy guy with all that he does for the Marquee Network, and then on his own to do that stuff. Like it's a lot that goes into it, right? Like I think about having to write an article for Pitcher List every now and then, the amount of research that goes into it, and he does one of those in detail every day on a handful of pitchers. So it's a lot of work and it's great stuff, and he's you definitely see what he gets out of it with the product that he puts out. So yeah, I don't miss a Lance recap, pitching recap or video. So
yeah, we didn't
appointment TV for me. Yeah,
it is. We didn't have, we wanted to make the most of our time with him, so we kind of rushed through the intro. But man, like I think it was last year, Steve, where it was like it seemed like every not only every analyst, but every pitcher that was doing something very interesting, when you would kind of crawl Twitter and look for like, what's happening behind the scenes, and you're thinking you're going to get like 140 characters on a tweet, and then he would have these screenshots of the notes. And these like in the stuff that he was including in these notes were not like honestly, it was only like Nick is what comes to mind, like Nick Pollock type of thing, where it's like,
and Nick does every single pitcher, so it's not necessarily as, not that Nick's, I read that every day too, and it's amazing. And Nick does it every single day for every starter. Lance does a deeper one on
it's just cherry picking, guys. Right? Yeah, kind of cherry picking.
I mean, it's still,
but it was like it seemed like from last season till now, it's kind of been starbursts of like being referenced on CBS, by Nick, by Eno, and then all over Twitter. I'll admit, my experience with Lance's stuff, his advice and tweets, everything was on Twitter before I even realized he was with Marquee and the Cubs and everything. And it's like, dude, he's in so many places that I know. I
remember now he said it like I remember seeing all his like breakdowns on Razzball too. Like that's where his name first came up to me too. He did write for Razzball for a while there too, which is great. And I hinted at it with Lance.
Prospects Live, co-founder.
Yeah. I hinted at it too. Like a lot of times when you're talking about pitch metrics and break, and it could seem like just a drivel of like numbers and stats that you don't understand. And I think Nick and Lance both do that, both make it consumable, which is not the easiest thing to do when you're looking at like raw pitching movement. And it's like, wait, what is vert again? Like, you're not asking yourself that question.
No.
Because they just break it down so well. And Lance does an amazing job of that. So it was absolutely awesome to have him on and talk pitching. Kind of like a starstruck moment for me. Just because I know that he said, and I get it, like people want more of a fantasy twist towards it, but like this is the raw data that is going to help you be a better fantasy player. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I grabbed Jared Jones in the last round on the wire because of Nick and because of Lance and what they saw in spring training with him, right? Like these guys are like they didn't say, "Oh, this is my sleeper," like it's not that, but it's the raw data to see why someone could be good, and they consume that and communicate it really well, like
Yeah.
Lance said his goal was. Yeah.
Well, and every now and then, Nick certainly there, Eno and Lance, I think, is in that group that you come across baseball minds in this industry that aren't just for fantasy, but it's like there's organizations that could use that, like the type of digging in that some of these guys do out there, which is so cool when you kind of see the crossover of fantasy and reality when it comes to this game we love and the sport we love. So yeah, a lot of fun there. Steve, now we can kind of open it up, but I did swap out, way overdue, Jack Leiter as my prospect for the name you threw on this rundown here, David Festa. Now, I know there's question marks around if Festa will get a crack in 2024, but for the Twins pitching prospect, talk to me about this guy, because the strikeout numbers are like eye-popping, and talk about searching Twitter, like some of these videos out there. He just looks like he's dominating batters. So I would love for you to make me feel better about this ad, even if maybe from a redraft standpoint, it's a little bit of a pipe dream that he'll get a shot this year.
Yeah. I also recently made the switch to have David Festa, or I think Christian Scott was a guy that I had in my minor slot that opened up, added Festa. The guy who first put him on my radar was Thomas Nestigo, guest of WAF 2 weeks ago now it was, or was it last week? I think it was 2 weeks ago. And he just brought up the fact that he's sort of been breaking out and putting things together in the minor leagues. Like the strikeout numbers are eye-popping. The walks are concerned, and what really put him on Thomas's on TJ Stats radar was the fact that he had a 3-start stretch prior to the most recent one, with 14 innings, 28 Ks, and just 5 walks. And that was after walking at least 2 guys in his first 4 starts. And that also included a 3 walk outing and a 4 walk outing. And he wasn't able to go past 4 innings. He finally started to put together. His last start wasn't great. It was 4 innings, 4 strikeouts, 2 walks, and 2 runs, gave up a homer. And it does seem like there's a homer problem too. There's been there's been 6 homers already so far in his 34 innings in the minors. But yeah, and I think Eno talked about it on Rates and Barrels too when they were talking about some pitching from prospect stashes. There's not really many like now that Skeens is up, like there's not really many pitchers that don't have some sort of flaw, at least as a prospect, right? Like Jacob Mizorowski's kind of walking the world. There's been some injuries, and with Cade Horton, his velocity's been down a bit. And I don't know if he's been injured, but some injury concern. Even Festa, he has sort of the walk problem too, but he's in a spot where, like, he had a 10, an 8, and a 10 strikeout game. Like a few more of those, he may be knocking on the door because he's 24 years old and the Twins need all the help they can get. So, not necessarily all that. That's probably a little facetious. Simeon Woods Richardson's done a good job, but I wouldn't see them holding him down if he continues to strike out the world in the minors.
Yeah. So you think there's a possibility that by
I think so. He's 24 years old.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm looking at his innings totals. He had 92 innings last year, around 93 innings the year before that. So, he's at 34 this year. So it's not like he's had a massive workload, so maybe they could be saving some of those bullets for the majors, right?
Mm-hmm.
That could make me, I could talk myself into that sort of narrative, but I don't know, man. I think that if you do have a spot, I could see holding Horton over him. I could see holding Mizrowski, but not many others, at least prospect wise in the minors, that I would want to stash over him.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it seems like a lot of the ones that were prospect eligible have either gotten called up
They're up.
or
Yeah.
or something like lighter where it didn't work out. Man, I sure wish the Cardinals with Tink Hence,
Yeah,
even
that's a good one. Yeah.
in Peoria,
Cade
we've got
Povich is another one. He may be next, and I know Means had some elbow soreness today. He's actually leading AAA in K minus BB. Has a 208 ERA, 258 FIP, 361 xFIP. So that I probably would hold Povich over Festa, but
Mhm.
it's close. I don't know if Povich, he is striking out 34% of the guys this year. So really impressive stuff from Povich.
Mhm.
And he does have 126 innings under his belt from last season. So that may be the play.
Foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
one. That's a watch list one
Yeah.
right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Hence is in AA, but it has been really
Yeah.
good so far by, Cardinals will find a way to mess it up. But 39 innings, 46 strikeouts, 3.18 ERA. But
Povich
yeah,
is in
just
AAA
yeah.
too. That should
Oh,
be
so
stated. Yeah.
so that's
Yeah.
probably a good one over Festa. Very
Yeah.
nice. All right. Well, Steve, we can open it up here, man.
Yeah,
Just
we've never really had this, right? We've never really had like
just
an
airtime, man.
open.
I mean,
Yeah.
one of the questions that we had for Lance was talking about like our favorite part about analysis. It's
Mhm.
a question we've never really done Q&A, you and I, but we've been doing this now. This is our 4th season. What is your favorite part, Steve, about pitching analysis?
About pitching analysis. I don't know. It's something that I definitely feel like as I've done this, I've gotten better at. Um, and I definitely think I'm better at finding at least for fantasy. Like I'm better at building a pitching staff than I'm hitting. Like even though I draft all these sort of earlys, my offense at least this year stinks. Um, and I feel like I'm always complaining about offense and always trying to trade away pitching for offense because I have this excess in pitching. I think it's for me, and it's kind of like my philosophy. It's identifying a guy who is being drafted in the mid to late rounds, um, who becomes an ace that I don't want to draft next year. Right. Like that
Right,
was
right. They get
like
too
the
pricey.
perfect one for me was McClanahan, right? Like drafting him in the 10th round,
Yeah.
then he was a second round pick and like I'm out. Or,
Mhm.
picking up Strider, becoming a first rounder and then having no shares the next year.
Mhm.
Um, you know, uh guys like that for me right now, like for me this year so far, it's like a Monica, right?
Mhm.
That's something that I'm riding high on. Same with Jones, to a certain extent too. I know he's younger, so it's a little bit different. But yeah, I mean, I also, have a lot of shares of like Grayson Rodriguez that I know he was hurt for a while, but it looks like he's ready to take that next step. Two, I know your boy Bobby Miller. I think he's on the way back. I think he's going to take that next step when he's back, and that's my favorite part. It's identifying the mid round guys and late round guys that break out. And I think that the way to do that is to read guys like Lance, is to read guys
Yes.
like Nick Pollock. Sure, I'm on Savant all day, but and I'm on Alex Chamberlain's pitch leaderboard. But there's a better way to digest that information when it's communicated to you in a way that Lance and Nick put it together, and that's sort of how I do it
Mhm.
with guys like Lance that we just had on, that we're lucky enough to have on. So, um, Yeah, like that's my favorite part.
Yeah.
And be rewarded for when you get guys like that. Yeah.
That is awesome. Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is it really is a puzzle, and I think that's the cool part. Even hearing Lance talk about it, where can't stress enough. And if you guys read his work, then you know what we're talking about. He is amongst the industry, like 99th percentile in terms of piecing that puzzle together. And even now there are names where he'll say like, I don't have the slightest clue, man. Like maybe you guys have an idea, or like, and Nick's like that too, where he'll reassess all the time. But like, Ranger Suarez is the second best pitcher in baseball so far this season. It's like, what are we talking about? A year ago, like Ranger Suarez was kind of like a Holly, better than a Toby type of thing. And it's like, to me, that's such a cool thing. The one I was proud of was like Justin Steele or like Nick Pivetta, but it's like, even when the industry is out, sometimes you can piece together, reasons to be excited. And then even otherwise, like we have all these variables, we have these sliders, we have these red and blue things, we've got K minus BB and pitch mix changes. And even with all of that, there still are guys who just defy the odds based on the sport itself. And I think that's what's really, really cool when you can start to find just reasons. And that's, like you said, it's stuff that Lance writes up about. You'll read it and be like, oh, what could he, what is he doing? Oh, well, the changeup is he's using it to attack lefties differently.
Yeah, in a different location. Yeah,
like,
yeah.
You can't find that without running a ton of different splits, and you have to almost know what you're looking for. So those are definitely some really cool things that it doesn't get old, I think is the theme there, and it's why we keep doing it. So very, very cool. But Steve, yeah, floor is open if you want to hit on anything else. I was going to go to pitchers tonight that we could just kind of talk, because we also don't do a lot of real time stuff, but like Cole Reagan's 12 strikeouts shutout win against the Tigers. You brought up Max Fried had the complete game, 1 run against the Cubs. That's what Lance was fresh off of. 9 strikeouts there for Fried. Skubal had kind of a bumpy outing.
I think Skubal had I think there was some noise that he had a blister that he was battling with pre-start and couldn't throw the changeup. I'm actually going to bring that up if you riff a little bit more. I'm going to see how many changeups he threw to see if that actually.
Yeah, I mean, other things right now, like Michael King got the win tonight, which again, it's like 1 degree separated from the real game. I was just listening to Lance Brozdowski on that Dodgers one, that YouTube video. He has an interview clip with him talking to Michael King. It's just cool stuff. So Michael King, 6 strikeouts in 6 2/3 at Cincinnati. Gets the win there.
Skubal did throw 21 changeups. Only got 5 whiffs on it though, for a 24 CSW. And I'll bring up his season stats on that as a comparison. So he was able to throw the changeup. It's just I'm not sure if he was able to use it as effectively as he could. The season whiff percentage on it is 45%. So close to half of the swings and misses he would get, and he only got 5 whiffs today. So clearly something was bothering him with that, even though he was able to throw it, and just really didn't have the overall sharpness that we've seen from Skubal. So I think as long as that blister's not a problem going forward, he'll be fine. Fried, it looks like Fried's like here, right? Like there was a lot, not some. I feel like there was a lot of concern after the first few starts, right? Like his ERA was above 5 till a start versus the Marlins on April 23rd. It popped up back up after a bad start, not decent start against the Dodgers over 4, and now it's back down to 338. And it looks like, any buy low window on Fried is closed.
There's still a buy low window. This might be the topic of the night, Steve. Blake Snell gives up 4 runs in 3 1/3 inning to the Pirates upon returning. I think some of that was from it looks like a grand slam after he turned the ball over to a reliever, so kind of on his tab. Yeah,
I would be all over Blake Snell as a buy low. He does
I
this
mean,
every single year.
yeah, 15 swings and misses on 87 pitches. Yeah, I mean, that's honestly
I
the
guess
4
the only
walks is annoying,
difference
but he was striking guys out for sure.
the only difference is that there's an IL stint in this. I'm not sure specifically if that last year in San Diego, or that year in San Diego, I think it was 2022, where he had like a 5 ERA at the All-Star break and then finished with like a below 3 ERA.
Mhm.
You were all over him that year and held
Mhm.
on, I think. I don't know if there was an IL stint early on in the season. And also you have to couple it with the fact that he got a late start, which I think makes it even more of a buy low.
It
And
does.
sure, like, if he started his normal progression, maybe there wouldn't have even been an IL stint, because this would have came up in the middle of March. He would have like missed maybe the first week of the season when he actually got hurt here. Obviously, that's it's a whole different timeline. You can't just
Yeah, right.
um, um, make that assumption that's when he would get hurt. But you would think that could be the progression that he would have went through. Um, to have like a normal season, and he starts slow normally anyway, right? And he makes these changes and finds the right mix and gets the feel. Like he talked about
Mhm.
last year, right? Like he was doing really well in the first half, and he's like, I don't even have the feel for my slider yet, and then he
Right.
got it, and then he had an amazing second half and went on to win the Cy Young.
Mhm.
Like it just seems like Blake Snell's the kind of guy that's always doing this tinkering that Lance talked about, and isn't afraid to do it in season. And then once he finds the right one, he's going to get comfortable. Like, pitching half his home games in San Francisco. Blake Snell may be like my favorite buy low pitcher right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the manager who has him, I mean, his ERA is like an 11. So the
Yeah,
manager who has him was waiting all this
has to be
time, and then they're
frustrated,
frustrated.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
absolutely. I really think that this is a good option. And in his rehab starts, I think it was like, yeah, he had, I think it was something like 13 or 14 no-hit innings and like 15 strikeouts. So like, yeah, the K's are there. And if he can get the walks in check, which seems like something that's like shaking rust off a little bit. I love Blake Snell as a buy low on this. So um, yeah, that's all good there. Well, Steve, I know we didn't have a ton of time with Lance because the guys just got a ton of stuff going on, but that was an absolute blast. Is there anything you wanted to close with before we wrap up here?
No, we got another awesome guest lined up for next week. I think we could spoil this one. It's
Mm-hmm.
in-house PL. Kyle Bland coming on next week. We're going to do a deeper dive into the bat speed metrics and to have some more actionable advice and dig into some player names with that with Kyle. He's done some
Kyle's been on
amazing.
before. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
clear the schedule, Steve, because that could be an hour and a half. Kyle
Oh
just
yeah,
he's
yeah.
down to go there with us. It's
Yeah,
fantastic.
and unfortunately for him, his Avs are eliminated from the playoffs, so we won't have any time
No
constrictions for him to have to
conflict.
go watch the Avalanche game. Um,
Yeah. Oh
there,
man.
but yeah, super pumped to have Kyle on next week. That'll be exciting. Anything you guys want to know, tweet us, email us, whatever.
Yeah, get
Kyle will,
selfish. If there's
yeah,
players on your team you want us to
yeah.
run a breakdown on, we're
Yeah.
gonna have one of the
It doesn't have
better.
to even be
Yeah.
with the bat speed stuff. Like, yeah, we're gonna get into it and talk about some of the cool things that he's done. He's built an app already, with like swing acceleration, rolling swing charts, some stuff that is actually meaningful in season. Not that the bat speed metric isn't meaningful, but there is a lot of noise to it and it's new. But Kyle has put together some awesome things that you could use and consume and easily understand what you're looking at and actually use it. Like a rolling swing graph with swing speed, you're able to see, okay, this guy clearly, like, oh, he sat because he was banged up on May 4th. Like, what's his swing speed since then? It's gone down. Oh, like he's clearly still battling something. Or this guy, worked on his swing and is developing more bat speed. Like, you're able to see that with Kyle's rolling charts. He also
Mhm.
has an acceleration chart, which is something that a lot of people wanted to see, like how
Yeah.
quickly your bat could speed up, essentially. Which I think a lot of the smart people thought that would be the most useful and thing they wanted to see from this data. And Kyle's already put together something to attack that. So super excited to have him on next week. and talk all get back into hitting because I definitely need the help to find some hitters that'll help my squad after going 6 for 34 every night.
Yeah, I heard that though, Steve. That said, I mean, just as the quick check-in, I feel like our leagues are going decently well. We talked NFBC that we're both, whether TGFBI, Raz Slam. Steve's in first place in our Raz Slam league. I'm in second. So if you guys are wondering if you're listening to the right show, look no further.
Don't look at our listener league though.
Do not look at the listener league. Don't listen to the Goon Squad. Any of that. In the home league, Steve, I'm in third place and on the healthy 4-game dominating streak. I'd say my pitching's amazing, but I think the entire league's pitching is amazing right now. So just a quick check in. How's the home league doing over there for you?
It's the pitching's great. The hitting got hot for about 2 or 3 weeks there, and then the last week and this current week it's back to hitting below 200 for the week.
What are you at a healthy 7th place, looking to eye a charge to the playoffs?
I'm in 4th right now, but having a tough week so far. After hitting 2 homers last week, I know it's only Wednesday, but I only have 1 so far again. So it's where I don't even want to look at how the squad's doing. You've also jumped up to 6th tonight in our listener league. If you would look at that, you're representing well.
Wow.
Ben, the 2 Bens, Pernick and Bingham are crushing it in first place, but it's pretty tight. Like I know it's a 12-teamer, so it's a little different. So, but 87 points is in first, and then all the way down to 7th is 64th. So it's not that big of a spread, right?
Yeah, that's healthy. Top to bottom, dude, our draft champions. So I'm 5th draft champions, listener league 6th, TGFBI 4th, Raz Slam 3rd. So not terrible over here.
Yeah, not
could
bad,
be making a move in the home league 3rd as well. So we'll stop there while we're ahead. But yeah, if you guys do want to add any names for the Kyle Bland show, cannot wait. That's going to be such a good one. You guys can tweet us. I'm at Van_verified. Steve is at Stav8818, or you can email the show, winsabovefantasy@gmail.com. If you guys made it this far, of course, we always do the shameless plug. If you could go out, leave us a rating and a review, goes a long way for us. Hopefully you guys enjoyed tonight's show. And yeah, next week should be awesome as well. So again, shout out to you, Steve, on lining up some awesome guests. This has been a fun way to spend May. So with that said, that wraps us up for episode 140, Wins Above Fantasy, how to evaluate pitchers with Lance Brozdowski. Thanks for talking baseball with us.
Thanks, guys. Later.